It was July 30th, 1944, in Normandy. A unit of the 6th Guards Tank Brigade, equipped with Churchill tanks, had become separated from their infantry. These tanks, designed to tackle the toughest terrains, had already proven their strength in Dieppe, North Africa, and Italy. Alone and vulnerable, they advanced through the dense countryside, unaware that they were being watched by Germany's newest weapon. Hidden from view, 3 Jagd Panthers waited patiently. Each of these powerful tanks was armed with an 88mm cannon. Developed in time for Normandy and personally approved by the Führer, the Jagd Panthers were ready to ambush the Churchills, showing that despite the Allied invasion of northern France, Germany would not easily surrender. In the landscape of St. Martin de Bois, one of the most intense tank battles of the war unfolded. The British Army's experience in World War I had demonstrated the importance of tanks capable of crossing trenches and difficult terrains, leading to the development of the infantry tank. This type of vehicle, designed to advance alongside infantry and withstand heavy fire, moved slowly but with great resilience. Faced with the imminent German invasion, the British quickly developed their newest infantry tank, the Churchill. Named after the Prime Minister who had promoted the development of such vehicles years earlier, the Churchill was designed to overcome trenches and rough terrains, with the expectation that the war in Europe would be similar to the previous conflict. As the Churchill tanks advanced, the Jagd Panthers, hidden and ready for combat, prepared for the ambush. The tension was palpable. The British unit did not know what awaited them, and with each moment, they moved closer to danger. The impending confrontation promised to be brutal, with each side determined to prove their superiority on the battlefield. That day, Normandy became the stage for a decisive battle where courage and strategy would meet. The skill and determination of the soldiers would be tested to the maximum, with the fate of many hanging in the balance. The initial sketches and prototypes of the project looked promising, but the devastating speed of the German blitzkrieg and the fall of France in 1940 demanded a complete revision. The new and improved Churchill tank was known for its exceptionally thick armor, one of the heaviest among Allied tanks, providing robust protection against anti-tank weapons. The Churchill also had an exclusive suspension system, allowing the nearly 40-ton vehicle and its crew of 5 men to navigate difficult terrains, although it moved slowly, with a maximum speed of 19 kilometers per hour. In no time, the British Army's newest tank was ready for battle. In mid-August 1943, a force of about 6,000 soldiers, mainly inexperienced Canadians, was sent to the French port of Dieppe to test the viability of landings in enemy territory. 60 of the newly developed Churchill tanks from the 14th Tank Regiment were designated to support the infantry, with the mission of reaching the city and a nearby airfield before retreating for extraction. However, shortly after the attack on Dieppe began, they faced unexpected challenges, starting with the composition of the landing beach, whose large rocks made it difficult for the tanks to move. Of the 30 Churchills that landed under heavy enemy fire, only 15 managed to reach the Dieppe boardwalk. There, concrete defenses and the lack of demolition engineers further limited the vehicle's progress. In the end, only 10 Churchills made it back to the beach for withdrawal, but they could not be evacuated, resulting in a significant failure. Despite this, even the Germans were surprised by the feat, as they believed that Dieppe's beach was impassable for any vehicle. Afterward, 2 earlier models equipped with 2-pounder guns and 6 of the newer versions with 6-pounder guns were sent to North Africa to train with Major Norris King and form the Special Tank Squadron, known as King Force. In the Second Battle of El Alamein, the powerful King Force supported most of the main attacks. Although the fighting in North Africa gave the Churchills a chance to prove their worth, providing much-needed protection with their armor, even the most powerfully armed models showed insufficient firepower. During the Battle of Alamein, a crucial victory in the African theater, the Churchill tanks played a fundamental role. In a decisive action, a Churchill was essential in capturing the latest German heavy tank, the Tiger I. This capture allowed Allied war planners to study the German tank in detail, learning about its strengths and weaknesses. In 1943, in Italy, the Churchills demonstrated their ability to traverse rugged terrains, such as the steep hills and ravines common in the Italian landscape. The tank's performance in the Italian campaign helped restore confidence in its capabilities, despite not being a perfect vehicle. The Churchill was then put into additional service as the troops marched towards Rome, becoming a key component in the British and Commonwealth armored advance to the north. Churchills were a common sight on the front lines, especially as part of the tank brigades operating in support of the infantry. As the D-Day landings in Normandy approached, the Churchill tanks were sent to France in late spring of 1944. Meanwhile, Germany's newest tank was also being prepared for its first mission there. After facing the Soviet T-34 and KV-1 tanks during Operation Barbarossa, German war planners realized that their Pak-36 tanks were inferior in terms of armor and firepower. Despite being aware of the significant disadvantage, Germany faced serious economic and industrial problems by late 1942. The engineers were forced to combine existing designs to create a powerful yet economical tank. Thus, the Jagdpanther was born, using the reliable chassis of the Panther tank combined with the 88mm Pak-43 gun. This powerful anti-tank weapon was, at the time, one of the most potent, especially effective at long distances and capable of penetrating the armor of any Allied tank that approached. Additionally, the Jagdpanther featured thick, sloped armor for greater protection, a low profile for better concealment, and a powerful engine. The suspense mounted as the confrontation drew near. With the Churchills advancing in Normandy and the Jagdpanthers prepared to defend, both sides were about to test their tanks in a battle that could change the course of the war. The tension was palpable, and every soldier knew that the coming hours would be decisive. The courage and strategy of each side would be put to the test in a fight where only technical superiority and determination could guarantee victory. The stage was set, and Normandy would become the battleground where the most formidable machines of the era would meet. Uncertainty and fear dominated the soldiers' thoughts, but there was also a fierce determination in every heart, ready to face the enemy and fight to the end. After the full-size model was presented to Hitler in October 1943, the Führer gave the green light for production, which began a few months later, in January. When the Allies landed in Normandy in early June 1944, the first units of the Jagdpanther were ready for combat in northern France. On June 6, 1944, Allied forces heroically and successfully invaded the beaches of Normandy. Among the first armored vehicles to land in support of the invasion were the Churchill tanks, which helped destroy some of the fiercest German coastal defense units, accompanied by infantry units. Although D-Day marked the beginning of the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi occupation, what followed was not a swift advance to Paris, but a long and arduous battle. For more than 6 weeks, American, British, Polish, and other Allied forces slowly advanced through the terrain of northern France. The terrain, with its dense woods, small ancient towns, and hedgerows, favored the defenders and was ideal for ambushes. Additionally, hundreds of mines in the area further delayed the Allies' progress. The situation worsened when well-rested and well-equipped German reinforcements arrived in the area. The Germans were not ready to give up. The Allies, however, were also determined to win. To try to break out of Normandy, they launched a series of operations in mid and late July. In the British sector, the final move was Operation Bluecoat, which aimed to capture the strategically important Hill 309 in the Comontelevent Ridge from the 326th German Infantry Division and take a road junction in Vire. This capture was crucial to disrupt German communication lines and hinder the movement of reinforcements. The operations were risky, and each day was marked by intense confrontations. The suspense was palpable. Every soldier knew that any wrong move could mean the difference between life and death. The Churchill tanks advanced slowly, facing not only German forces, but also the treacherous terrain and scattered mines. Every step was a test of courage and determination. Meanwhile, the Jagdpanthers awaited, ready to defend their positions. With their 88mm guns, they were prepared to face any threat. The battlefield was set for an epic clash, and the fate of Europe depended on the outcome. The tension increased with every moment. The Allies needed to advance, but they knew the enemy was prepared. Each soldier felt the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, but also a fierce determination to fulfill their mission. The fight for Hill 309 and the junction in Vire would be decisive. As the battle unfolded, the scene became more chaotic. Explosions, gunfire, and shouts filled the air, creating an atmosphere of despair and hope. The Churchill tanks, with their thick armor, bravely resisted, while the infantry soldiers advanced under heavy fire. Amid this chaos, the courage and resilience of the soldiers were tested to the maximum. They knew that victory would not be easy, but they were ready to fight to the end. Each step towards Hill 309 and the junction in Vire was a step closer to liberation. Finally, after days of intense combat, the Allies managed to take Hill 309 and the junction in Vire. Operation Bluecoat was a success, but the fight was far from over. The road to Paris was still long, and many challenges lay ahead. But at that moment, with Hill 309 under Allied control, there was a new breath of hope. German resistance had been broken, and the march towards freedom continued. Each soldier, marked by the battle, knew they had contributed to a crucial moment in history. The suspense and emotion of that time would never be forgotten. The determination of the Allies and the courage of the soldiers were fundamental to the eventual victory. The battle for Normandy proved that, even in the most difficult situations, hope and courage can prevail. Operation Bluecoat was planned as a complement to Operation Cobra, led by the Americans. While Cobra focused on the western part of the front, Bluecoat aimed to facilitate a significant breakout from the Normandy bridgehead. On July 20th, the British Army's 6th Guards Tank Brigade, equipped with Churchill tanks, landed on the beaches of Gold and Juno, ready for its first action in the precursor movements of Operation Bluecoat. In the early days, the operation seemed to be going well. The Churchill tanks advanced 6 miles over terrain that would have stopped any other vehicle. However, the challenging bocage terrain quickly proved to be a significant tactical challenge. Cooperation between tanks and infantry is essential in military operations, especially in complex terrains like Normandy. The tanks, with their greater speed and mobility, advanced faster than the accompanying infantry. The soldiers were delayed by physical obstacles and sporadic enemy combat, resulting in a disconnect between the units. Without infantry support, the tanks became more vulnerable to ambushes and anti-tank measures, as they lacked the close-range protection that the soldiers could provide against such threats. Consequently, the 6th Guards Armored Brigade lost contact with the infantry and became isolated. No one knew where they were. One of the squadrons advanced far ahead of the others and, unknowingly, encountered a new and formidable enemy. On July 30th, the first official day of Operation Bluecoat, in the dense vegetation near St. Martin de Bois, a dangerous surprise awaited the Churchill tanks, 3 enormous Jagdpanther tank destroyers, hidden in the foliage, waiting for their prey. The British tank squadron advanced unsuspectingly through the terrain, when the silence was shattered by the deafening roar of the powerful 88mm guns of the Jagdpanthers. Fire and smoke erupted as the shells tore through the air, swiftly hitting their targets and marking the first attacks of this newly developed vehicle. The tension in the air was palpable. The Churchill crews, caught off guard, tried to react, but the ambush was relentless. Every shot from the Jagdpanthers hit its mark with deadly precision, turning the battlefield into a scene of chaos and destruction. The dense vegetation that once offered cover now seemed like a deadly trap. The Churchill tank crews knew they were in a desperate situation. Communications were cut off, and infantry support was non-existent. With each passing second, the pressure mounted. They had to make a quick decision: fight to the end or attempt a desperate retreat. As the Jagdpanthers continued their fierce attack, one of the Churchill commanders, with a mix of courage and desperation, decided to counterattack. He ordered his tank to advance directly against the enemy tank destroyers, trying to divert attention and give the others a chance to escape. The sound of gunfire and explosions echoed through the forest as the British tanks fought for their lives. The battle was intense, and every move could be the last. The soldiers' courage was tested every moment, and the hope of survival diminished. Finally, after a brutal fight, the Churchill tanks managed to create a breach in the enemy line. Those who could still move retreated, leaving behind the wreckage and the fallen. Operation Bluecoat had begun with a terrible challenge, but the determination and bravery of the British soldiers showed that they would not give up easily. As the remaining tanks regrouped, the threat of the Jagd Panthers persisted. The battle was far from over, and the soldiers knew they would face many more challenges before Normandy was fully liberated. The courage demonstrated that day would become a legend, inspiring future fighters never to give up, even in the most desperate circumstances. What followed was a chaotic scene that lasted 2 minutes, with the German tank destroyers leveraging their superior firepower and strategic positioning. While the Churchill tanks struggled to respond, the Jagd Panthers dominated the conflict. When the encounter ended, the 3 Jagd Panthers and their powerful weapons had destroyed 11 Churchills. Despite their strong armor, the Churchills were simply too close and poorly armed to defend themselves against the Germans. The battle, although short and fierce, became the most concentrated infantry tank action of the war. When an additional squadron of Churchills rushed to help their besieged forces, the Jagd Panther operators had to abandon their vehicles due to track damage and lack of support. Even with the losses, a glimmer of hope emerged when the 6th Guards Tank Brigade captured 2 Jagd Panthers. Though brief, this encounter showed the strength of the new German tank destroyer and solidified its reputation as a great threat to any Allied tank or soldier it faced. The operation resulted in a significant advance, and the British forces captured several towns and important strategic points, including the crucial city of Vire, disrupting the enemy's communication and supply lines. Operation Bluecoat relieved pressure on the American forces in the West, especially after the advance in Operation Cobra, and both contributed to the overall weakening of the German defensive capability in the region. Despite its many flaws, the Churchill was fundamental in British combat during World War II and was a major contributor to the Allied victory that ended the war in Europe. In total, 7,368 Churchill tanks served the British for just over 10 years, in many different versions and variants. Although the Churchill tank remained in service after the war, it was gradually replaced by more modern designs, such as the Centurion tank. Even so, the Churchill saw action in the Korean War in 1950, where, just like years before, its strong armor and good climbing ability were advantageous in rugged terrain. During those 2 chaotic minutes, the battlefield turned into hell. The Jagd Panthers fired with deadly precision, and the Churchills, caught by surprise, barely managed to react. The tension was palpable, each shot resonating like thunder, and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. The British soldiers inside the Churchills knew that every second was vital, but the pressure was overwhelming. Coordination was crucial, but the tanks were disorganized, advancing blindly, while the Jagd Panthers stood firm, firing with lethal efficiency. Panic spread among the Churchill crews, who fought desperately to stay calm and find a way to counterattack. When British reinforcements arrived, bringing a new squadron of Churchills, the Jagd Panther operators knew they couldn't hold their positions for long. With track damage and no support, the Germans were forced to abandon their powerful vehicles. The arrival of reinforcements brought new hope, but the battle left deep scars. Capturing 2 Jagd Panthers was a major achievement for the 6th Guards Tank Brigade. These vehicles were feared on the battlefield, and having them in hand allowed the Allies to study their capabilities and weaknesses. Though brief, the encounter was enough to show how much of a threat the Jagd Panthers were. Operation Bluecoat, besides its strategic success, had a significant moral impact. The British forces, even facing enormous challenges, managed to capture vital strategic points like Vire. This victory not only disrupted German communication and supply lines, but also boosted the morale of the Allied forces. Meanwhile, the Americans, advancing with Operation Cobra, faced less resistance thanks to the British efforts. The pressure on the Germans was immense, and their defenses began to crumble. The Churchill, despite its flaws, proved crucial in the campaign, and its participation was fundamental to the Allied victory in Europe. After the war, the legacy of the Churchill continued. Although it was gradually replaced by more modern tanks like the Centurion, the Churchill still played a role in the Korean War. Its robust armor and ability to handle difficult terrain proved valuable even in a new conflict. The history of the Churchill is a testament to resilience and innovation. From facing Jagdpanthers in Normandy to climbing hills in Korea, the tank left an indelible mark on military history. Each battle, each advance, and each victory were achieved with courage and determination, showing that even in the most difficult situations, the will to win can overcome any obstacle. Despite being one of the most powerful vehicles of the war, the Jagdpanther entered the conflict too late to make a significant strategic difference. Even so, this tank destroyer fought in important battles such as the Battle of the Bulge, the defense of Germany, and the combats during the Soviet forces' retreat. The impact of the Jagdpanther was limited by production issues, mechanical challenges, and the overwhelming numerical and tactical superiority of the Allied forces. Although only 392 units were built between January 1944 and March 1945, the Jagdpanther was undoubtedly one of the most successful German tank destroyers of World War II. Although the Jagdpanther was one of the most powerful vehicles of the war, it arrived in the conflict too late to cause a significant strategic difference. Nonetheless, this tank destroyer still participated in important battles. It was present in the Battle of the Bulge, defended German territory, and fought during the Soviet forces' retreat. Even with its impressive capabilities, the Jagdpanther faced limitations. Production problems and mechanical challenges hindered its performance, along with the overwhelming numerical and tactical superiority of the Allied forces, which further complicated its effectiveness. Only 392 units were built between January 1944 and March 1945, restricting its global impact on the war. Still, the Jagdpanther stood out as one of the most successful German tank destroyers of World War II. Its presence on the battlefields, even in reduced numbers, left a significant mark. Allied tanks that faced the Jagdpanthers recognized their power and resilience, knowing they were up against a formidable machine. The participation of the Jagdpanther in the Battle of the Bulge was particularly notable. In this battle, German tanks made a last desperate offensive against the Allied forces. The Jagdpanthers, with their 88mm guns, inflicted heavy losses on the Allied tanks, but the numerical superiority of the enemies eventually prevailed. The Allied troops managed to break the German offensive, but not without first acknowledging the threat posed by the Jagdpanthers. In the defense of Germany, the Jagdpanthers played a crucial role. As the Allied forces advanced, the Jagdpanthers strategically positioned themselves to slow down the enemy's advance. Each battle was a trial by fire, and the Jagdpanthers, with their robust armor and devastating firepower, gave their all to protect German territory. However, mechanical challenges and resource shortages made their continuous operation difficult. During the retreat of Soviet forces, the Jagdpanthers once again demonstrated their effectiveness. The German tanks, in strategic retreat, used the Jagdpanthers to cover their movements. The tactic was simple: use the long-range attack capability of the Jagdpanthers to keep the Soviets at bay while the main forces retreated. Despite their efforts, the numerical superiority of the Soviets and the depletion of German resources made the task nearly impossible. In the end, the story of the Jagdpanther is a mix of unrealized potential and impressive combat performance. It stood out as one of Germany's best tank destroyers, but its late arrival and logistical limitations prevented it from making a decisive impact on the war. Even so, the Jagdpanthers earned a place in history as a formidable war machine, respected and feared by those who faced them. Although the Jagdpanther was one of the most powerful vehicles of the war, it arrived in the conflict too late to cause a significant strategic difference. Nonetheless, this tank destroyer still participated in important battles. It was present in the Battle of the Bulge, defended German territory, and fought during the retreat of Soviet forces. Even with its impressive capabilities, the Jagdpanther faced limitations. Production problems and mechanical challenges hindered its performance, along with the overwhelming numerical and tactical superiority of the Allied forces, which further complicated its effectiveness. Only 392 units were built between January 1944 and March 1945, which restricted its global impact on the war. Still, the Jagdpanther stood out as one of the most successful German tank destroyers of World War II. Its presence on the battlefields, even in reduced numbers, left a significant mark. Allied tanks that faced the Jagd Panthers recognized their power and resilience, knowing they were up against a formidable machine. The participation of the Jagd Panther in the Battle of the Bulge was particularly notable. In this battle, German tanks made a last desperate offensive against the Allied forces. The Jagd Panthers, with their 88mm guns, inflicted heavy losses on the Allied tanks, but the numerical superiority of the enemies eventually prevailed. The Allied troops managed to break the German offensive, but not without first acknowledging the threat posed by the Jagd Panthers. In the defense of Germany, the Jagd Panthers played a crucial role. As the Allied forces advanced, the Jagd Panthers strategically positioned themselves to slow down the enemy's advance. Each battle was a trial by fire, and the Jagd Panthers, with their robust armor and devastating firepower, gave their all to protect German territory. However, mechanical challenges and resource shortages made their continuous operation difficult. During the retreat of Soviet forces, the Jagd Panthers once again demonstrated their effectiveness. The German tanks, in strategic retreat, used the Jagd Panthers to cover their movements. The tactic was simple: use the long-range attack capability of the Jagd Panthers to keep the Soviets at bay while the main forces retreated. Despite their efforts, the numerical superiority of the Soviets and the depletion of German resources made the task nearly impossible. In the end, the story of the Jagd Panther is a mix of unrealized potential and impressive combat performance. It stood out as one of Germany's best tank destroyers, but its late arrival and logistical limitations prevented it from making a decisive impact on the war. Even so, the Jagd Panthers earned a place in history as a formidable war machine, respected and feared by those who faced them. If you enjoyed this story and want to learn more about the events and technologies that shaped the war, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any content about World War II and other historical conflicts. Thank you for watching and see you next time.